a 9-year-old girl watching her entire world burn, while Ottoman raiders counted their human cargo like precious jewels. What she couldn't know was that this moment of ultimate powerlessness would become the first step toward reshaping one of history's greatest empires. The year was 1502, and in the rolling meadows of what we now call Ukraine, a priest's daughter named Alexandra Lisowska was living the simple life of a village child. Her days were filled with the rhythms of rural orthodoxy, morning prayers echoing through wooden churches, the scent of her mother's bread, and her father's evening stories about saints who overcame impossible trials. But the Ottoman Empire was hungry for expansion, and Crimean Tatar raiders, acting as the Sultan's human hunters, were systematically harvesting the most promising children from Slavic villages. Alexandra wasn't captured by accident. The raiders had specific instructions: seek out children with exceptional beauty, sharp intelligence, and preferably from educated families. Her striking red hair, unusual green eyes, and the confidence that came from being a priest's daughter made her exactly what the slave markets of Constantinople craved. The journey to the empire's heart was a masterclass in survival. Chained alongside dozens of other children, Alexandra made a crucial decision that would define her entire future. Instead of surrendering to despair, she would study her captors. While other children wept or raged, she absorbed Turkish phrases, observed power dynamics, and began her transformation from victim to strategist. Constantinople's slave markets were theaters of human evaluation. Expert traders examined their merchandise like prized horses, checking teeth, skin texture, and, especially for young girls, future beauty potential. Alexandra, now renamed Roxelana in reference to her Ruthenian origins, was purchased by a palace intermediary who specialized in selecting candidates for the imperial harem. Most girls in her position faced a predictable fate: domestic servitude or, at best, becoming minor concubines forgotten by history. But Roxelana possessed something that set her apart from thousands of other beautiful captives, an intuitive understanding of power that went far beyond her years. Her language learning was phenomenal. She rapidly mastered Turkish, Persian, and Arabic, and her ability to read social hierarchies made her a formidable observer of human nature. The imperial harem wasn't the pleasure palace of popular imagination. It was a political institution, more complex than most royal courts, where the empire's most intelligent women competed for influence that could reshape nations. The rules were brutal in their simplicity. Only one woman could become the Sultan's true favorite, and that position meant wielding real power over the world's largest empire. Roxelana quickly grasped that survival required more than beauty. It demanded becoming irreplaceable. She cultivated skills that made her memorable: exceptional embroidery, musical talent, poetic ability, and most importantly, conversational gifts that made her company genuinely enjoyable. But her true genius was political. She understood when to speak, when to listen, and how to make others underestimate her ambitions. Her early harem years were dedicated to preparation. She studied how previous favorites had lost their positions, analyzed the preferences of Prince Suleiman, not yet Sultan, and built a carefully calculated network of alliances. She knew she would get one chance to capture the future ruler's attention, and when that moment came, she needed to be ready to seize it completely. What made Roxelana truly dangerous was her refusal to think small. While other women competed for temporary favor, she was planning to rewrite the fundamental rules of Ottoman power. The slave girl wasn't just surviving. She was preparing to revolutionize an empire. When Suleiman ascended to the Ottoman throne in 1520, he commanded armies that stretched from the Balkans to North Africa, but there was one territory he hadn't conquered: his own heart. Roxelana's entry into his life wouldn't just change his personal destiny, it would transform the entire empire. The Topkapi Palace harem housed over 300 women, each selected for extraordinary beauty and trained in the finest arts. But among all these perfected companions, Roxelana possessed something the others lacked, the ability to make the world's most powerful man genuinely laugh. In a court where everything was ceremony and protocol, she dared to joke, to intellectually challenge, and to display a personality that refused to dissolve in the Sultan's presence. 26-year-old Suleiman was complexity incarnate. Poet, lawgiver, conqueror, he'd inherited an empire that dominated 3 continents. But absolute power created profound isolation. The harem women offered beauty and pleasure, but Roxelana offered something infinitely more valuable: authentic intellectual companionship and a personality that remained intact in his presence. Their first private meeting became the moment that would define both their lives. Instead of adopting the traditional posture of complete submission, Roxelana addressed him with a blend of respect and confidence that was utterly unprecedented. When he asked about her previous life, she didn't fabricate a tragic victim story or claim noble origins. She spoke honestly about her family, her memories of Orthodox churches, her first impressions of Constantinople, all with a directness that the Sultan rarely encountered in his court. What followed was courtship unlike anything in Ottoman history. Suleiman, accustomed to women competing for his attention through beauty and compliance, discovered in Roxelana someone who challenged him intellectually. She had mastered Ottoman Turkish reading and writing, studied Persian poetry, and could discuss Islamic theology with an understanding that surprised even court scholars. But Roxelana was too intelligent to rely solely on intellect. She understood that the Sultan's power depended as much on image as reality, and she began carefully constructing her own personal brand. She became a patron of charitable works, funded mosque and school construction, and developed an information network that kept her informed about everything happening across the empire. The turning point came when Roxelana became pregnant with Suleiman's child. In the Ottoman system, this automatically elevated her from concubine to Iqbal, a position of considerable honor. But she had far more ambitious plans. She used her pregnancy not as an opportunity to relax, but as a platform to consolidate political influence. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, initially saw Roxelana as a minor threat. After all, dozens of women had borne children to previous sultans without challenging the established order. But Roxelana wasn't like the others. She began actively participating in political decisions, sending letters to provincial governors and developing her own diplomatic network. Mehmed's birth in 1521 marked the beginning of a new era. Suleiman, traditionally reserved in his affections, showed devotion to Roxelana that scandalized the court. He didn't just visit her regularly, unusual for a sultan, but began seeking her counsel on state matters. Their surviving correspondence reveals an emotional intimacy completely unprecedented in Ottoman history. Roxelana's strategy was multifaceted. Publicly, she maintained the image of a devoted mother and pious Muslim. Privately, she worked tirelessly to eliminate political rivals and position her children as the most viable heirs to the throne. When other concubines attempted to gain the Sultan's attention, she didn't resort to jealous scenes, a tactic that had destroyed many predecessors, but instead reinforced her unique position as the only woman who could offer Suleiman both love and political advice. The decisive moment came when Suleiman made a decision that shocked the entire empire. He freed Roxelana from slavery and officially married her. For the first time in over 200 years of Ottoman history, a sultan had married one of his concubines. The marriage wasn't just an act of love, it was a political declaration that elevated Roxelana to an unprecedented position in the imperial hierarchy. The girl who had been sold as a slave at 9 had become the legal wife of the world's most powerful man. But her real test was just beginning. This transformation is absolutely mind-blowing. If you're loving this epic story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Next chapter reveals how Roxelana used her new position to eliminate her enemies and consolidate power that would change history forever. Roxelana's marriage to Suleiman the Magnificent wasn't just a love story. It was the opening move in the most audacious political operation in Ottoman history. What came next was a masterclass in how a brilliant mind can rewrite the rules of absolute power. The marriage's immediate consequence was transforming the imperial harem's power balance. Roxelana, now officially Hürrem Sultan, was no longer simply a favorite who could be replaced by someone younger or more beautiful. Her legal status made her a political institution in her own right, with economic resources, administrative authority, and most importantly, legitimacy to act in the Sultan's name. But her most dangerous enemy wasn't in the harem. It was at the empire's very heart. Mustafa, Suleiman's eldest son by another concubine, was widely considered the natural heir. Brilliant, charismatic, and beloved by the Janissaries, the empire's military elite, Mustafa represented the greatest threat to Roxelana's children. In the Ottoman system, succession was decided by survival. When a sultan died, his sons fought until only one remained alive. Roxelana understood that eliminating Mustafa was essential for her own children's survival. But direct confrontation would be suicide. Instead, she developed a years-long strategy combining psychological manipulation, political intrigue, and absolute patience. Her first move appeared innocent. She began sending regular reports to Suleiman about Mustafa's activities during his provincial assignments. These reports, presented as maternal concern for her stepson's welfare, contained subtle suggestions about the young prince's political ambitions. Roxelana never directly accused Mustafa of treason, but planted doubt seeds that slowly grew in the Sultan's mind. Simultaneously, Roxelana built an alliance network spanning the entire empire. She used her position to place protégés in key administrative positions, funded public works that increased her popularity, and developed independent diplomatic relationships with foreign powers. Her correspondence with France's Catherine de' Medici and other European leaders demonstrates sophisticated understanding of international geopolitics. Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, Suleiman's childhood friend and the empire's second most powerful person, initially underestimated Roxelana. This miscalculation would cost him his life. Ibrahim had developed a personal relationship with Mustafa and was seen as an obstacle to Roxelana's plans. Using fabricated evidence and psychological manipulation, she convinced Suleiman that Ibrahim was developing personal ambitions threatening imperial authority. In 1536, Ibrahim Pasha was executed by Suleiman's direct order. The Grand Vizier's elimination didn't just remove a political obstacle, it sent a clear message to the entire court. No one, regardless of their closeness to the Sultan, was safe from Roxelana's influence. But her political masterpiece was yet to come. For years, Roxelana had been carefully building a case against Mustafa. She used a spy network to document every conversation, meeting, and gesture that could be interpreted as evidence of treasonous ambition. When she finally presented her evidence to Suleiman, she didn't frame it as an accusation, but as painful revelation from a wife concerned for her husband's safety. Suleiman's paranoia, carefully cultivated over years, finally reached its breaking point. In 1553, he ordered Mustafa's execution during a military campaign. The prince, who had come to his father's tent expecting a routine meeting, was strangled by imperial executioners while Suleiman watched. Mustafa's death was Roxelana's triumph, but also marked her transformation in popular perception. She was no longer seen simply as a concubine who had risen through beauty, but as a political manipulator whose influence over the Sultan was so complete she could orchestrate her heir's death. With Mustafa eliminated, Roxelana focused on positioning her own sons for succession. Mehmed, her eldest, was her preferred candidate, but his premature death in 1543 forced her to recalibrate. Selim, though less brilliant than his deceased brother, became the new focus of her dynastic ambitions. By 1558, when Roxelana died, she had achieved something that seemed impossible 20 years earlier. She had completely rewritten Ottoman power rules and positioned her son Selim as the throne's most likely heir. The slave girl had become the architect of a new form of imperial power. Roxelana's death in 1558 ended an extraordinary life, but began a transformation that would echo through centuries. The slave girl, who had defied an empire, had accomplished something no conqueror had managed, permanently altering the nature of Ottoman power itself. Hürrem Sultan's funeral was unprecedented in Ottoman history. For the first time, a woman who wasn't Valid Sultan, the reigning sultan's mother, received full imperial honors. Suleiman the Magnificent, the man who had conquered Budapest and besieged Vienna, publicly wept for his wife's death, an emotional display that scandalized a court accustomed to absolute imperial composure. But Roxelana's true legacy wasn't found in her husband's tears, but in the power structures she had created. Her son Selim, exactly as she had planned, became Selim X after Suleiman's death in 1566. Though not a particularly brilliant sultan, his throne ascension confirmed that the Ottoman succession system had changed forever. The most profound transformation Roxelana achieved was institutionalizing female power in the Ottoman Empire. Before her era, imperial harem women exercised influence, but always within strictly defined limits. Roxelana had proven that a woman could directly participate in empire governance, maintain independent diplomatic correspondence, and accumulate significant economic resources. Her successors leveraged this precedent to create what historians call the Sultanate of Women, a nearly century-long period when sultans' mothers, wives, and favorites exercised unprecedented political power. Figures like Safiye Sultan, Hürrem Sultan, and Turhan Sultan built upon Roxelana's foundations, essentially ruling the empire during weak or underage sultans' reigns. Roxelana's architectural influence also endured long after her death. The mosque, school, and hospital complex she funded in Constantinople became a model for elite Ottoman women's public works. These constructions weren't simply charitable acts, they were political statements, establishing their patrons' permanent presence in the empire's urban landscape. Beyond Ottoman borders, Roxelana's story captured European imagination. Venetian ambassadors wrote fascinated reports about the Russian witch who had enchanted the world's most powerful sultan. French and English playwrights created theatrical works based on her life, though these representations often revealed more about European prejudices than historical reality. Roxelana's diplomatic correspondence with European leaders established important precedents for international relations. Her letters demonstrate sophisticated 16th-century geopolitical understanding and negotiation abilities rivaling professional diplomats. Some of her diplomatic initiatives, particularly her French contacts, would influence Ottoman foreign policy for decades. But perhaps Roxelana's most enduring legacy was transforming perceptions of female potential. In an era when women, even nobles, had limited opportunities for independent power, she had proven that intelligence, determination, and political strategy could overcome any social or cultural obstacle. The historical irony is that while Roxelana broke barriers for elite women, the system she helped create also institutionalized slavery and oppression of millions. Her personal success was built upon the same imperial structures that had destroyed her own childhood, a reminder of the moral complexities inherent in any historical power analysis. Modern historians have constantly re-evaluated Roxelana's legacy. For centuries, she was portrayed primarily as a manipulator who used sexuality to gain power. More recent research has revealed the depth of her political understanding and power strategy sophistication, presenting her as one of her era's most skilled political figures, regardless of gender. In the 16th century context, when the Ottoman Empire was at its peak and directly competing with European powers, Roxelana's influence on imperial politics had consequences extending far beyond empire borders. Her decisions affected Mediterranean power balance, Ottoman-European relations, and the course of wars between Islam and Christianity. Roxelana's story also raises fundamental questions about power's nature, individual transformation capacity, and political success costs. Her rise from slavery to imperial power pinnacle testifies to human ability to adapt and triumph in the most adverse circumstances. When we look back through centuries at that 9-year-old girl watching her native village consumed by flames, it's impossible not to feel amazed by the distance she traveled. Roxelana didn't just survive her original world's destruction, she built a new one where the rules had changed forever. Her legacy endures in every woman who has challenged her era's expectations, every person who has transformed adversity into opportunity, and every individual who has proven that the power to change history isn't reserved for those born in palaces, but for those possessing the intelligence, determination, and vision to rebuild the world according to their own terms. And so ends the incredible story of Roxelana, the slave girl who became the Ottoman Empire's most powerful woman. If this story inspired you as much as it inspired me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. What do you think about Roxelana's legacy? Was she a visionary or a manipulator? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.